Setting up CodeFreedom is pretty straightforward task. Just need three prerequisites: Python 3.10 or above, Docker, and a UV. UV is a popular Python package manager. Let's see in action. I have managed to set up some of the environment variables which are representing secrets because I don't want to handle during the screen capture. The process itself is explanatory, and there is assistant script which you can use to set up the same variables. So now let's install the command line. The alias is CF or CodeFreedom. We use CS, CF for just ease of typing. Now, we can have a couple of different options. First, we can configure everything from scratch, or we can use predefined recipes. I would recommend to use predefined recipes. To use them, we can actually use command CF setup initialization, and if we press L, we'll get all the recipes available. You can actually go on this particular link as well, which will take you to the GitHub, a project which is also open source. Copy yourself, create your own recipes from it, pretty much free. Nothing, no string attached. You can create your own, and you can also use your own Git repo to use this command line to actually download the recipes as well. We'll discuss into detailed videos, but in this one, we'll keep it straightforward right now. So let me install this cost-effective coding recipe, and all I need to do is basically call TA and just this name. You can use P for planning first and apply. PA will do planning first. It will tell exactly what it is going to do. And these are the scripts, by the way, I was mentioning, that you can use it to set up the secrets. Sounds good. And all fantastic, perfectly done. Everything that we do with the CodeFreedom is basically set up into the home directory, like any other application or CLI. And this is all generated by this particular CLI. So we don't need to worry about what we should do or not. If we use this, and if we want to go a little bit adventurous and configure your own stuff, add or modify on these recipes, you can use this to modify. But I would recommend actually to take a clone or fork of the GitHub repository and then make a change and use it as a proper sync instead of making it ad hoc, because accidentally you may overwrite it if you download any other recipes, and those doesn't know that you have made some systematic changes into it. So it's always better to maintain via the GitHub. Now let's say we run this proxy. So it has three components: proxy, configuration part, and management part. The management part helps you to do the backups and all sort of stuff. The configuration parts is generating configuration for agents, your code IDs, and everything else that probably comes around it. And the proxy is where the artificial intelligence models been mashed up together. So you can choose, they can fall over based on the rulings or the routes you define. So it's everything that probably self-contained in three different components that we can see. And by the way, right now it's probably downloading all the tool Docker containers, and as well as it is also downloading our own custom light LLM Docker container. And by the way, this is custom built light LLM Docker component. The reason it is light LLM does provide a lot of enterprise feature. We have scaled it down and we have made it for individual users or small team. The purpose of CodeFreedom is not actually to replicate the same functionality that it has. The purpose is for individual assistant or individual proxy or for the smaller teams. And that's to solve that, we have scaled it down. And also there is another area which we want to address with this, and that is transparency, which means whether the user has certain skills to manage this kind of infrastructure or not, it doesn't matter. The CLI take care of everything. So as long as you understand a couple of the commands around CLI, this should look after everything underneath. So by the way, while we are talking the Docker icon up and running, you can actually have the UI as well to test and validate. So if I refresh, it will be on the 400. And let's see, things looks good. Mainly I need to re-log in because it was the last session. Don't worry about that. It's just probably right now trying to validate before it was up and running, and this is a silly bug. I need to fix it, but nonetheless, let's go on playground and try to create a simple validation. So I'll clear the chat and say write me a poem, and let's see if it works. Well then, so it actually gone to open router's free router and got everything down there. And you can see here that everything we have configured, the min, max, MiMo, and other agents, you can feel free to configure anything using those YAML. There is one other thing which I can mention here, and that is, for example, the MiMo 2.5 is not a VL, so that means it cannot handle the images. But using our custom configuration and setup, it can do actually something called a sequential routing, which means there is already predefined image routers which can handle the image and then bring the response back and combine with the MiMo or any other model which does not provide vision support. And that is very helpful because the cost effectiveness of both models will deliver in some sort of a very unique advantage to handle the code request with some screenshot at very easy and very cost effective way. So let's say explain this image. So it's now already set up in there, and meanwhile it is actually explaining. If we see here, you will see it is chaining a couple of the command, and that's how it actually found everything we can see here. It chained the command, it figured it out what it is, and then voila, excellent. So if you go back and see the logs here, if I full screen this, it actually went to the open router and processed it. And this is the one which it routed using the Python HTTPX. So internally, it identified the routes and also make those calls to those individual LLM, which is important to get the analysis of image and then combining together with MiMo, which actually generated the final analysis. That's perfect. Now let's see if we want to use any agent, like coding agent. This does not install any coding agent. So the coding agent need to be installed via the official channels. We don't install, we don't patch, we don't crack, we don't do anything with them. All this third component which I mentioned, the coding agent, all this does is create a configuration. And create a configuration, for example, JSON files, supporting files, or the environment variable setup in that particular session, and then call using the PMO or equivalent of process call to the exe of that particular coding agent. So everything in that coding agent will be pre-configured for you. So if you want to call it, we just can say run ng for agent, mc for let's say MiMo code. So all it does, it just bring the everything up and there. And here it also manages the configuration and history of whatever we are doing. So for example, we run the MiMo code, it created the configuration that is needed. It injected the configuration also, what custom models we supported, etc. So if I go and say models, so it has already configured the Freedom proxy. Now, if someone doesn't know how to configure these custom things and other areas of nitty-gritties, doesn't need to worry. Everything will be looked after just like that. Also, it provides some significant benefit over the sandboxing. The real challenge with the sandboxing is the configuration breakdown between the in-process instance and the sandbox instance. And this exactly solved because everything is coming from this profile configuration. So we have a single source of truth for every agent, and that is transformed into individual application and individual instance, whether it's a sandbox or a non-sandbox or in process, whichever the instance is. It always guarantee the configuration parity. And this was a real problem within my own setup as well in my own company. And this is the whole product that come from that particular problem. So let's say I just say sandbox, and what it will do, it will open up an ephemeral. You can see here the container instance. It is now putting it, and it is running as the container user. It is not running, by the way, as the regular user. It identify the workspace wherever it is being triggered, and you can see here it's loading the correct sandboxing environment, it's loading the correct environment variable, it's passing all the profile references that it needs, and it also integrate the proxy as well, which means you can use the setup that you already got with your in process as well. And all these setups are cherry pickable. That means if you don't need proxy, don't use proxy. Just use configuration parity component for launching this coding agent. If you don't want to use a coding agent launcher, just use the proxy and setup as OpenAI compatible. If you don't want either of them, you may actually use the management for extracting configuration, building configuration, and etc. So it's a pretty much cherry pickable components. They don't need to work together. So if this is now sandbox, and let's say I move to MiMo 2.5 and say create index.html with hello 1. Now it is running via the container attaching to the workspace that is here, and when we run, it automatically set up the tools as well. So all the MCP server and profile also remain common across the board. So it has created the latency here, and if you open into integrated browser, well done. And now if we exit, and let's say I want the cloud code, okay? So that's just a CC, and all the commands are available at the help switch as well. So you don't need to worry. Let's say setup. Of course, we're setting up first time, and we can see here MiMo code was set up. It created a sandbox when we run it. It set up the default profile which we run, and by the way, everything remain of that MiMo code is set up as a home. So it does not even allow kind of a directory level infusions. It creates the complete separation of concern on each and every layer, and that's a real benefit. Creating a separation of concern at each and every level with the correct configuration parity, and that's the power of this particular component. That's one of the main reasons why we build it. If I would say just simple as like that, update index.html. By the way, let me see what's the model it's running. Yep, let's say MiMo 2.5. And by the way, you can see here it's pre-configured as well. Update index.html with new line saying updating from cloud core. And more importantly, whenever it's being called, you can have a trace of it. So currently I'm using OpenCode's Zen and Go subscription, which has some of the free calls as well, and it has also the paid call, and then it can fall back on the API. So first it goes to the free, then it automatically fall back to the subscription quota, and once the subscription quota also run out, it fall back on paid one. So that's the thing. We can actually have a multiple subscription from multiple places, and whichever the best use case available for us, whichever the best cost effective setup available for us, we can actually configure it as a service mesh. And that's the idea of this whole approach, is like we can create the providers here, and you can see here with every provider I have set up the orders. So go with the free model routing first, open API, the open router, which is basically API level pricing, go third order, and the subscription side in the second order. And I have multiple subscription like a GitHub Copilot subscription, Open Code subscription, Go subscription, and couple of other subscription, which provides me the best value for money for individual models which I'm looking for, and they all are configured in this way, 1, 2, and 3. And some of my internal setup are also having 4 or 5 layers of priorities, so they fall back seamlessly, they fall back gracefully on one to other without any problem when the quota get exhausted or something like that, and the user never has to feel the pain of manually changing one or two other. And that's the power of it. So yeah, it worked perfectly fine. You can see here it's a cloud code now, CLI from MiMo code. It also tracks your all usage, cost, and everything per model, how it is going, why it is going. You can also use to capture your incoming and outgoing messages itself, though it can generate large amount of data. But if you're looking for example, um, um, let's say reinforced learning at a later stage, you can actually do it. Or you want to run something which we run regularly, something called refactoring, which means we actually access all the content, what worked well, what didn't work well, like what we do in regular retrospectives. So it automatically runs through all the captures we have, successful, non-successful, the important highlights and everything, and it creates the retrospective context, which is like around 200 to 300 line of context, and we constantly map into memory as a long-term memory, and that also help us to build better sustainable AI architectures. So there are a lot of ways you can do it, and we'll go through individually in each and every possibility into subsequent videos, but this is how we come to this point. Thank you very much for seeing this, and please make sure you subscribe and press the bell icon. I'm gonna flood a couple of good videos after I finish some prior this basic introductory videos, and it will help every developer to pick up something. Even you're not using it, this is a perfect architecture for any agentic routing, agentic design, agentic implementation if you're design to going through. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video.